Flat rides are a vital element that makes up an amusement or theme park. These rides can offer thrills just like the larger coasters, and can even induce some unique sensations too, usually in a smaller footprint and costing less than the average coaster. Of course, flat rides aren't the only things that make up a park, but they often are some of the most underappreciated rides, despite the majority of rides in a park usually being flat rides. One of the most well-known flat ride manufacturers are S&S Sensei, who have brought several successful flat rides to the amusement industry. These include, but are not limited to, the Shot Tower, Screamin Swing, and even the infamous Sky Sling. However, there is one flat ride model that stands out compared to the rest, one that provided the most unusual sensations and a massive amount of visual appeal. This short-lived flat ride model had the opportunity to take the world by storm, but now is considered nothing more than a large misstep. This is a story of one of the most unique flat ride models ever created. This is the story of the S&S Sky Swatter. The story of the Sky Swatter originates with the founding of S&S. Originally founded to sell bungee jumping and trampoline equipment, S&S Sport was founded in 1994. The name S&S was chosen to represent the couple who founded the company, Stan and Sandra Checketts. It wouldn't be long before S&S would soon dip their toes into the amusement ride industry. 1995 was the year S&S would give the world a space shot. This ride model consisted of a gondola which would shoot up a 180-foot tall tower. The launching mechanism for this ride was unique for the amusement industry, as it used compressed air to launch riders up rather than a weight drop system or a flywheel launch, seen on coasters dating back to the 70s. The first two space shots opened at what is now Six Flags Mexico, as well as the defunct D&D Adventure. Some notable space shot installations include Big Shot at the Stratosphere Las Vegas, Ice Blast at Blackpool Pleasure Beach, and Maliboomer at Disney California Adventure. This ride model would later be enhanced and modified to become the Turbo Drop model. This ride was very similar to Space Shot, but instead of shooting riders up the tower and letting gravity bring the gondola down, it would instead lift the gondola to the top and then drop them. This ride was as popular as the Space Shot, with even some combo towers opening, using both shot towers and turbo drops. The most famous of these is Power Tower at Cedar Point. S&S would deviate from building flat rides around the turn of the century. This time, it would be their turn at a roller coaster. S&S was smart with their first coaster model by choosing to work with the technology they had already been working with for half a decade at this point. They decided to apply their air compression launch system for their tower rides on a prototype launch coaster track to create their first coaster model, the Thrust Air 2000. This prototype featured a compressed air launch into a top hat and then a turn before returning to the station. This prototype would soon be bought by CBS to add into one of their Paramount parks. Originally bought for Paramount's Great America, plans changed which led the ride to end up at Paramount's King's Dominion. The ride opened in 2001 as the infamous Hypersonic XLC, with multiple layout modifications from its days as the prototype. This ride has its own unique story which can cover a video all in itself, so I'll leave this here for now. The next flat ride model that S&S would unveil would be their first blunder. Enter the Sky Sling. This ride was essentially an upscaled bungee ride found in many local fairs. 3 265-foot tall towers would be connected to a small 6-person gondola by cables. During the ride cycle, the gondola would be shot up at 50 miles an hour to a height of 300 feet, with the towers being built to sway in order to reduce stress. 3 of these opened in 2001, one at Cedar Point, one at Knott's Berry Farm, and another at Six Flags Magic Mountain. Cedar Point's Sky Sling, named Vertigo, suffered a partial collapse in the off-season which resulted in both Cedar Point and Knott's Berry Farm's models being removed for the 2002 season. The cause of the incident was deemed to be due to vortex shedding, a phenomenon where cylindrical objects are rattled by wind over a long period of time. It was found that if the park kept the gondola attached to the towers over the off-season, the incident wouldn't have occurred, as the gondola would have absorbed the extra stress put on the towers. The next ride to come out of S&S was in development for years. In fact, it had essentially been in development since the company had begun. This ride, however, didn't get a fully built prototype until 2002. This ride looked wildly different compared to other S&S rides, which all had very similar builds, all being towers. Even their next coaster model, the Screamin Squirrel, looked like a tower when facing it a certain way. This ride, however, was something different. Rather than riders sitting on a gondola around a tower, the seats for this ride were on either end of a large arm which would rise between 4 small towers, 2 on either side of the centre of the arm. Once the arm had risen, it would rotate one way multiple times before it would stop and do the same number of rotations the other way. This ride was nothing like S&S had ever made. This was their first true flat ride. By the end of 2002, one model had already been bought and would open the following year. It wouldn't be long before the public would ride S&S's latest creation, the Sky Swatter.
It's such an unusual looking ride.
Appropriately enough, Six Flags Astroworld in Houston, Texas has dubbed its new extreme ride SWAT.
2003 would be the debut year for the Sky Swatter. Six Flags bought the first of this model, and the lucky park to receive it was Six Flags Astroworld. This ride was placed in the Plaza de Fiesta area along with another new for 2003 ride, Diablo Falls. The ride itself would be given the simple name of SWAT and would take up some land from the park's former Texas Tornado coaster. SWAT instantly became a popular ride due to how unique it was, not just for Astroworld, but for parks in general. Guests would take their seats on either end of the main arm on 2 separate loading platforms. Each set of seats could hold up to 24 riders, meaning there would be a maximum of 48 riders per cycle. Riders would then pull down their restraints, which consisted of a lap bar which came down from the side, as well as shoulder restraints. The idea behind these restraints was to make the rider feel as open as possible, however the shoulder restraints were added as a redundant safety feature. Once riders were strapped in, the ride cycle began. The main arm, with use of air compression, was lifted up to the top of the 4 main towers. Once at this height, the arm would begin to spin. The arm would rotate one way a total of 3 times before pausing and doing the same number of rotations backwards. During these rotations was when the ride would reach its maximum height of 105 feet at speeds of 35 miles an hour. Once the ride had rotated 6 times, the arm would lower back to the ground and guests would exit the ride. SWAT proved to be a popular ride at Astroworld, with its visual appeal attracting riders and non-riders alike. The ride's unique design, as well as popping colour scheme and Aztec style face connected to the ride structure, certainly caused this ride to be a favourite for both those who rode as well as observers. SWAT also proved to be a television star in its opening year, as it was featured on the Discovery Channel's Extreme Rides. This wasn't SWAT's last claim to fame, however, as the Sky Swatter ride model was featured in one of the expansions for the 2004 game Roller Coaster Tycoon 3. In this game, the ride shares several aspects with SWAT, including the colour scheme as well as the Aztec face. The next installation of the Sky Swatter was announced in 2004, but would be far from its Texan sister. Thorpe Park announced 2 flat rides would be arriving at the island in 2005, both manufactured by S&S. One of these would be a Screamin Swing named Rush, which would be placed on the former site of the park's Ferris wheel. This ride model was relatively new, with the first opening in 2004. The other ride would be placed behind X No Way Out, near the park's Canada Creek area, and would be the second Sky Swatter. Thorpe Park's second new ride would be given the name of Slammer.
Your ride is about to begin. Hold on tight at all times and prepare to endure the full throttle rotating freefall experience of Slammer.
Slammer made its debut in March 2005 and almost immediately highlighted the main issue with the Sky Swatters, their unreliability. In fact, the ride suffered a major fault on its second day of operation, causing it to be closed for 2 whole weeks. As a quick side tangent, this sounds very similar to what happened to Thorpe Park's newest ride, Hyperia, which closed the day after its opening day due to a mechanical issue and didn't open again for nearly 3 weeks. Back to Slammer. The ride would often be down due to its mechanical issues. One breakdown which would happen often would be the arm locking up once it reached the top of the towers. Swat would also experience unreliability, but Slammer would experience downtime more often. However, Swat and Six Flags Astroworld as a whole would have a lot more to worry about than just maintenance. In September 2005, Six Flags announced that Astroworld would close on October 30th. Many of Astroworld's rides would be relocated, and luckily for Swat, it was one of them. Both Swat and Diablo Falls would reopen at Six Flags New England in 2006, although with name changes and no longer sitting next to each other. Diablo Falls would be put near to Mind Eraser and be named Splashwater Falls, while Swat would be placed near Cyclone and be given the name of Catapult. As the years went on, both Sky Swatters would continue to experience many maintenance issues. In 2006, Slammer was involved in an incident where its levelling mechanism failed. This caused riders to be left stuck at a 45-degree angle. At this point, Catapult proved to be the more unreliable of the two, however. Due to its unreliability, Six Flags New England had put Catapult up for sale in 2007 with the intent to remove it in the off-season. However, the park changed their minds and instead had the ride overhauled for 2008, which improved the ride's reliability. The general nightmare that Catapult and Slammer proved to be caused many potential buyers to not purchase the Sky Swatter. Due to this, S&S discontinued the Sky Swatter model in 2010, with only 2 ever being sold. Slammer closed early in 2010 and continued to have issues during testing in the off-season, which caused the ride's main arm to not fully raise up. Despite this, the ride was able to be fixed for the 2011 season, but the worst year for the ride would be 2012. This year, Slammer would be unable to operate until the last month of the season due to mechanical issues. By this point, both Sky Swatters were suffering from major downtime. Despite Slammer's issues in 2012, the first to be removed was Catapult. The ride closed at the end of the 2012 season and demolition began in early 2013. With the way the park was taking down the ride, it was obvious the ride was being scrapped. The ride's queue and platform stayed in place until 2014, where the site was replaced by the queue for the New England Sky Screamer, which reused Catapult's original entrance. Around the time Catapult closed, Slammer also seemed to be at the end of its life. All of the ride signage was removed at the end of the 2012 season. However, the ride reopened in 2013. The fate of Slammer was once again hinted at, as by the time Fright Nights 2013 came around, Slammer was absent from the park map. This caused many people to believe Slammer was truly dead. However, it was seen testing in 2014. It seemed this ride just wouldn't die, as it once again reopened in mid-2014. When Slammer wasn't down for maintenance, the ride itself was very divisive. Many people would love Slammer due to its intensity as well as visual appeal, while others hated it due to its uncomfortable ride experience. Either way, this ride continued to operate, although it still experienced many technical difficulties. Slammer didn't operate for Fright Nights 2015, however, the ride returned with a bang in 2016. Compared to previous years, Slammer was much more consistent in its operation. Its downtime was much lower, and it seems Slammer's issues may have finally been worked out. Slammer closed on October 26, 2016 and was expected to reopen in 2017, as recently it proved itself as one of the park's more reliable rides. When the park opened for the 2017 season, Slammer was standing but not operating. In April, the park announced that the ride would be closed for the 2017 season, most likely due to more technical issues. People thought this would be it for the season, however, the park announced in May that Slammer would be permanently closed and would never return to the park. It seemed as many technical difficulties had finally caught up to it, and finally caused the Sky Swatter to die. The closure upset many of Slammer's fans, although people were still excited for what was to come next. As the season went on, not much occurred. The ride signage was once again removed and the entrance was blocked off. Nature began reclaiming the ride site as time went on, with no news of a replacement for Slammer. This would change when the lineup for Fright Nights was announced. One of the new mazes, the Walking Dead Living Nightmare, would reuse Slammer's entrance and queue, even hanging the sign where Slammer's once was. The maze itself sat in the building for what was at the time X, meaning Slammer itself remained untouched for this new edition. In 2018, the ride was still standing, despite people believing the ride would be removed during the off-season. Unfortunately, Thorpe Park visitors would have to wait years for the ride's permanent replacement. This would come in 2021, but not how people were wanting it to. Living Nightmare closed after Fright Nights 2019 to make way for this new year-round edition. This would come to be a walk-through mirror maze near Black Mirror Labyrinth, based off the Netflix show Black Mirror. Originally supposed to open in 2020, this ride was pushed back a year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Upon opening, people realised that Black Mirror Labyrinth wasn't exactly a replacement for Slammer. While this ride did once again reuse Slammer's entrance and queue, the main ride structure was still left in place, now fully being reclaimed by nature. Black Mirror Labyrinth wasn't received well and would eventually close in 2023. Many people believe this meant the mothballed Slammer would finally be removed in time for 2024. This was due to a park-wide renovation project named the Sparkle Project. The aims of this project was to make the park more presentable in anticipation for the park's latest edition, Hyperia. Other parts of this project included a full repaint of Samurai, a half repaint of Colossus, and the re-theming of Angry Birds Land into Big Easy Boulevard. When the park opened for 2024, Slammer was still standing on the outskirts of what once was Canada Creek, later named Old Town. Nothing had been changed at the site, except for the removal of Black Mirror Labyrinth's sign. This continued to be the case after Hyperia and Fearless Valley made their debut on the former site of Old Town. Many people were confused as to why Slammer stayed standing despite being an eyesore very close to the new Fearless Valley. Thorpe Park visitors would get their answer, however, as leading up to Fright Nights, activity was seen behind Slammer. This was later found to be a new scare maze taking up the site of Black Mirror Labyrinth named Deadbeat, which, once again, reuses Slammer's entrance and queue. As of now, Slammer still sits close where it did back in 2017. However, it's most likely that Slammer will finally get torn down in this off-season as the Sparkle project continues. Whether that day comes this off-season or in a few years' time, only when Slammer is removed can we say the S&S Sky Swatter is extinct. Catapult and Slammer certainly weren't completely beloved. Their divisive ride experience as well as their unreliability made it obvious as to why these were the only two Sky Swatters ever sold. Despite this, these rides were still very important for S&S. These were their first true flat rides, the first of their rides to break away from the tower design, but who knows. If the Sky Swatters didn't exist, maybe the future of S&S would look wildly different. Either way, S&S took a gamble, and while it didn't pay off in the way they wished, it did mean memories were made riding the Sky Swatter sisters. With Slammer's imminent removal, the Sky Swatter will soon be extinct, but the mesmerising ride won't be relegated to the history books. From the fond memories riders have of Slammer to Swat's appearance in Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, the Sky Swatter will never truly be forgotten. It will go down in amusement history as one of the most unique flat ride models ever created. In a roundabout way, the Sky Swatter never went extinct, it's just a different kind of living.